Still safe.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Close enough. Take a majority vote. But
Yeah, we're gonna vote to see.
I'm not here.
We are talking about the Constitution in general. When we left, we were talking about Article 2 in particular. What does Article 2 discuss? What branch of government? The executive. Everything that has to do with the president and vice president. And we had just finished up with the oath. The oath of office for president is actually listed in the Constitution. All right? Now, the president can be impeached for treason, bribery, high crimes, and other misdemeanors. All right? Now, one of the things that the presidents throughout history have been doing is they have been writing executive orders. Now, the first president to ever write an executive order was George Washington. Now, an executive order is for the people who work for him at the White House. You know, it's like order more paper clips. No starch. That's an executive order. Right? Since then, presidents have been using executive orders for a whole lot more than that. Now, let's just pick on Bill Clinton because he's an easy target. Bill Clinton signed a total of 357 executive orders while he was president. Now, these executive orders basically give some form of absolute authority to one of the federal agencies in time of national emergency. So, if there is a national emergency, FEMA is going to go in and take care of all the hospitals and stuff. In a time of national emergency, your Energy Commission is going to go in and they're going to take complete and total control over power generation. And other agencies are going to go in and take over complete control of transportation. The FCC, I mean, you guys don't do radio stations, but in every radio station, in all their radio, electronic setup, they've got a chassis built into the system where the FCC can automatically, by remote control, take over the radio station. So you can be doing the wild 50s music or whatever, and suddenly they send out a radio signal and they are broadcasting and you're not. Isn't that great that the federal government can take over what goes out over the airwaves? Now, I've got on page 15 of your handout, I have a list of which executive orders Bill Clinton signed in which year. Notice that in 2001, and he left office January 21st, in 3 weeks before he left, he still signed 3 executive orders. Now, Paul Begala, his top advisor, has been quoted. He's been on TV saying, "Stroke of the pen, law of the land." Kind of cool, huh? Well, yeah, I suppose if you're the king. It was a monarchy when the king would sign a proclamation and make it law. If Bill Clinton does that, doesn't Bill Clinton bypass Congress? What happens to our series of checks and balances? Just thumbing their nose at it. So, I don't care who Bill Clinton was sleeping with. If Hillary doesn't care, why should I care? It's not hurting my feelings. But I'm a little bit irritated with the 357 executive orders that he signed. Each one of those, as far as I'm concerned, he should be locked up for treason. Now, back on page 49, I believe, of your handout, is a list of web pages. And these are web links that you can go to study a lot of these particular executive orders. Don't take my word for any of this stuff. Go out and do your own research. Read the executive order for yourself. And I've got summaries down there. 11,490 assigns emergency preparedness functions to federal departments and agencies. 10,997 emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Interior. Emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Agriculture. What type of emergency can you have in agriculture? You know? And down at 11,002, emergency preparedness functions to the Postmaster General. What's he going to do? Lick stamps for you? Why do all these things have emergency preparedness in common? They all deal with some national emergency. Guess who gets to decide whether or not there's a national emergency? The President. So with the stroke of a pen, suddenly you can have martial law overnight. No. This is the United States. That only happens in, Angola and Russia and all those other places. Yeah? And when the army tanks come rolling down your street, you're going to be going, oh gosh, I didn't think it could happen here.
The national emergency is not defined either.
National emergency is not defined anywhere. It's basically up to the discretion of the President. Oh, well, I feel a whole lot better. I trust the President. They were talking about Executive Order 12-919, which was signed June 3rd of 1994, not too long ago. And this executive order was written by Bill Clinton, released to the public, and just recently became law in 1998. It is an order that consolidates many previous executive orders into one sweeping executive order. Why have all these little tiny ones? We'll just bundle them all up into one sweeping order. And it says, quote, and in view of the existing national emergency declared by Proclamation 2914 of December 16, 1950. Yeah, what was that national emergency?
What page are you on?
This is page 15. We're on page 15 of the handout. So, in 1950, we had some sort of a national emergency, and Bill Clinton is writing this order because of the existing national emergency. Did you feel like you were in some sort of national emergency in 1994?
Yeah, elected.
They don't. They just have to. The point is, they just have to declare the national emergency. They don't have to tell anybody about it. So, we're finished with Article 2. Let's go to Article 3 of the Constitution. Now, let me show you the Constitution. How many articles does the Constitution have? 7. 7 articles. The first 3, legislative, executive, and judicial. So let's look at Article 1. It fills up all of the first page and almost all of the second page. I mean, and these are large pages. There's a lot of stuff in Article 1 for Congress. Then we start Article 2 down in the bottom and finish up Article 2 on this next page. So it's not quite a full page for Article 2 for the President. Article 3, I mean, it's like less than a third of a page. There's not a whole lot there. Well, what is the Constitution? The Constitution is supposed to be the chains of the Constitution, it's supposed to put limitations on government. Which branch of government has the fewest chains? The judicial. Which one do you think is most hazardous to your liberty? Now, open up your book on the Constitution to page 31. You'll see the beginning of Article 3. It says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. All right, that's good. Now down to the 4th and 5th line. The judges of both the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. What does that mean? They just have to comb their hair and brush their teeth before they show up? What does it mean that they are elected for good behavior?
Honor their oath.
It's life term. Once you're elected, you have to die or quit before you're out. You get elected once, and unless we impeach you for treason, you are there for life. That's why everybody wants to be a Supreme Court judge. You know, basically you don't have to worry about going up for election anymore. Why are we always worried about who we vote for in the popular election for president? Not that it means anything.
Because you don't know who they'll appoint.
Because the President of the United States is the guy that appoints Supreme Court judges. Imagine Al Gore being president, and who is he going to appoint as a Supreme Court judge?
Hillary.
And then you got that judge until that judge dies. That's why everybody's so worried about who the next president is, not because we give a 2 cents about what he is, but who he's going to appoint. We're going to be stuck with that person for life. Now, let us go to the bottom of page 31. This is the beginning of section 2. And it says, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity. What does that mean? In law and equity.
Constitution and contract.
Sounds like it means criminal and civil property. Yeah.
Okay, pretty close. You're on the right track. And then if you flip over to the next page, on page 32, about the, where is it? All cases. Okay, about the 4th line. To all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. Okay. The key is in this last phrase, admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. We have a different jurisdiction. These are the 3 types of law that the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over. We have, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But that is only common law. That's common law, which is the Constitution. In common law, everything is based on property. Surprise! What derives from property? Rights. The Constitution is supposed to protect your rights, and so it's got to be, common law has got to be based on property. So if you run over my mailbox, and that's my property, what has to happen? You have to restore my property. Instead of me beating you over the head with a baseball bat, you come over and fix my mailbox. As soon as you fix my mailbox, we're friends again. All right? There are two laws, or 2 aspects to common law. Don't mess with anybody's property, and do what you say you're going to do. That is where criminal law and civil law derive from. So, I've got criminal cases and civil cases. Again, criminal is based on the violation of property. Civil case is based on a violation of your word. You promised to do something, I was going to pay you, you reneged on the contract, and so I take you to civil law. Now, just briefly, let's flip ahead to the 5th Amendment. That's going to be on page 44. The Fifth Amendment is on page 44 of your Constitution, and the second to last line, it says, shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. What is due process of law? You get your day in court? Is that due process? If I've got this kangaroo court over here, I'm in West Virginia, and yeah, I've got all my brothers and sisters on the jury. You want to go and sit in my court? Is that due process? No. Due process means that you have common law, equity law, and admiralty law. Those are the three types of law that the Supreme Court is authorized to preside over. And they are different. Just like baseball, football, and basketball are different sports. They're all sports, but they are different sports. You don't stand on a baseball field and go, touchdown! People, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Here, someplace else, that may make perfectly good sense. You have to know what playing field you're on. Now, common law is all based on property. If I haven't damaged any of your property, or you can't show me a contract that I've reneged on, you've got nothing. You can't accuse me of it, or you can accuse me, but you can't put me in jail for anything. Now, what if you're in your car, I'm in my car, and we intersect, unfortunately, out on somebody else's property? Where's the property damage? Did I violate your property or did you violate my property? Well, it's kind of both at the same time, wasn't it? There's no clear property distinction. I can't say this was my mailbox. There is no defining line, no defining property line. So, common law really cannot apply. You can't say this was my property and not yours. That is where equity law comes in. Under equity law, the judge has arbitrary power. The judge can decide what the result of the case is. Equity means fairness. So this is all supposed to be based on fairness. Defined by who? The judge. So, I mean, if you like the judge and you trust him, that may not be so bad. But, you know, if you don't trust the judge, you may be in for a real rude awakening. Now, if it's not going to be in equity court, then you drop down into admiralty court. What does admiralty and maritime make you think of? Water. All right is based on property. If I go out onto the ocean in my boat, who owns the ocean?
Nobody.
Nobody. Nobody owns the ocean. There's no property. There's no land. I can say, this is my land, and the land's not going to move. But the tide comes in, the tide goes out. You know, nobody owns the ocean. And so you have a completely different body of law. When I go out onto a sailboat, I've said this several times, I don't know if any of you are sailors, has anybody here heard the expression that the captain's word is law? Okay? It's not a euphemism. It doesn't mean, oh, the old man's just grouchy till he gets a second cup of coffee. It means the captain's word is law. It doesn't have to be right. He just has to be the captain. When he goes out into the ocean in his boat, he has a 40-foot floating country, or however big his boat is. It's his country, and he is a dictator. End of story. He doesn't have to be right. He can throw you in the brig for anything he wants. You have your hair part in the wrong side. Now, if I'm floating out there on the ocean in my boat, and I find another boat, and there's nobody on the boat, who owns it?
The captain.
The captain. This is called, what is this called?
Salvage rights.
Salvage rights. Thank you. It's another senior moment. Okay? It's salvage rights, finders, keepers. I found it, nobody else claimed it, it's mine. End of story. Is that the way we do things on land? No. This is the law of the sea. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, based on property. Common law and admiralty law are supposed to stay apart, just like land and water. Admiralty law is allowed to come up on land as far as the high water mark, originally. Because what is the ocean used for? Do you live there? Heck no. All you use it for is just transporting and shipping goods back and forth. It's used for commerce. So anybody who had a ship out on the ocean, you were selling stuff or taking it somewhere to be sold. Now, when we had the United States is different. We've got the Great Lakes. England doesn't have any Great Lakes. We've got all these rivers that England doesn't have. You can send your ships up and down these rivers inland. Well, gosh, that doesn't make any sense anymore. We can't say law of the sea, so now it is really the law of commerce. It's not so much where you are doing it, it's what you are doing. So you've got three bodies of law that the Supreme Court can adjudicate. Common law, equity law, and admiralty law. And they're different. Right? Now, are those the only bodies of law? No. Those are the only ones that the Constitution acknowledges. So we can have, these are constitutional laws. Anything that is specified by the Constitution is constitutional. Anything which is prohibited by the Constitution is unconstitutional. What if something is not specified but not prohibited by the Constitution? What do we call that?
Administrative.
It's extra-constitutional. It's outside the constitutional, but it's not forbidden. One of your rights is the right to contract. You have an unlimited right to contract. Now, if I say, I will pay you $200 to paint the house my dog sleeps in, and you go, wow, it's a great deal. I mean, how big is the biggest dog house you've ever seen? You know, about yay big? $200? Yeah, I can do that in a couple hours. Yeah, I'll do that. You sign the contract. And I walk you around the corner, and I show you this, 3-story mansion. 27 rooms. They go, well, this is the house my dog sleeps in. Guess what? You're in deep trouble. Because you got to paint that house for $200. Was that a good contract? No. Is your right to contract unlimited? Yes. That's why they say, read the contract. They're not kidding. Now, that's common law, admiralty, and due process. Like I said, you have a right to common law process. The only time they can move it down is if the distinction of property is not clearly defined. Now, if we move to page 16, okay, Marbury versus Madison is a Supreme Court decision. It is a very important Supreme Court decision. Good and bad. Okay? The good news is that the decision of Marbury versus Madison in 1803 says, certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation. And consequently, the theory of every such government must be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. If it's unconstitutional, it was never a law to start with. That's the good news. The bad news is up above that. It says the critical importance of Marbury is the assumption of several powers by the Supreme Court. The assumption of powers. They assume that we can do this. Prior to Marbury versus Madison, who decided what is and is not constitutional? Well, the question never came up. It's not listed in the Constitution. Article 3 is very short. It just says that there is a Supreme Court. It doesn't say what they can or cannot do. And so John Marshall said, well, we're the Supreme Court. We are going to decide what is or is not constitutional. Okay, everybody just kind of went along with him. They didn't have a better idea. So now, let's pretend, just for a minute, that the Supreme Court decides that the First Amendment does not give you a personal right to freedom of religion. You only have freedom of religion if you are Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. Is that right? The Supreme Court said so. Does that make it the way things are? No! You have to remember, the Constitution says what the Supreme Court is. The Supreme Court does not get to say what the Constitution is. That would be circular logic. Who decides what is or is not constitutional? We the people. Who created this thing in the first place? If we decide the Supreme Court is out to lunch, it's up to us to correct it. There's no formal way to do that, but we can amend or abolish the Constitution anytime we see fit. Well, let's rewrite Article 3. So, I've just gone over constitutional, unconstitutional, and extra-constitutional. Extra-constitutional is not specified nor prohibited by the Constitution. It is basically just in addition to. Now, there are some ideas that came about because of all this shipping. You're in England and you ship all your stuff to North America, and all the people buy it and pay you in gold, which is the only thing they would pay you with. And your boat is coming back to the United States, or to England from the United States, with all this gold. What happens if the boat sinks? Well, yeah, salvage rights. Anybody who can get the gold, it's yours. It's laying right down there where the Titanic is going to be. That gold is lost forever and ever and ever and ever, for all intents and purposes. So what they did was they set up insurance companies where you had limited liability. You have several shipping companies, and if my boat sinks, the other shipping companies are going to help me pay for it, so that I don't lose everything that I had with that one boat. Now, the bad news is that if one of their boats sinks, I've got to chip in money to help pay for theirs. That's limited liability. Now, in order to have that, you have to have a contract, and only under contract can you compel performance. If the Constitution protects your rights, is there anything there that says you've got to come over and cut my grass? Can I force you to cut my grass or do anything for me, without paying you under the Constitution? No. I cannot compel performance unless there's a contract. So basically what they've done is they've set up contract law. Now, these concepts are very, very deep, and I have nearly enough time to cover them. However, I strongly recommend that when you continue your research, you continue your research on the various types of law. And if we flip back to page 16, the second paragraph there, if you want to understand the difference between common law, equity law, and admiralty law, I strongly recommend that you go to the internet to this ptialaska.net and read the USA, the Republic is the house that no one lives in. It is a 58-page document that you can download for free. Don't give me, oh man, 58 pages? Oh, that's a lot. Okay, don't read it and let your liberties go down the toilet. Liberty is not going to be easy. Reading a 58-page document is the least of your worries. And it is at the very least that you can do to protect your liberty. And that will give you a very, very clear understanding of the different forms of law and how much of this derives from Roman civil law, where you have no rights. So, we want to continue law. This is not all of the law. It's the three that are constitutionally specified, but there are other laws. All the laws written by Congress since the Constitution was written are called statutes. Originally, they were organized by date. That was the law that we passed in, 1789. That was the law that we passed in 1791. Well, when they weren't passing very many laws, that was easy. And then eventually, it was, gosh, was that the law that we passed on Monday or the one that we passed on Tuesday? And then eventually, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, gosh, was that before or after lunch? I just can't remember all these laws we're passing. So they organized them by index. And we have 50 titles. Those 50 titles are part of the United States Code. And you can download the United States Code off of the internet. And I give you a website on page 18. Basically at the bottom of page 18, you can download them. The only thing is you've got to download each title by itself. So it's a little bit monotonous, but you get all the information. You can also order a CD-ROM. I think it's about $35, $40. You can get it from the National Archive, and you'll have everything on one CD-ROM. Amazing stuff. I highly recommend it. Now, within the United States Code, there are two types of law: positive law and non-positive law. Positive law applies to everybody. The Freedom of Information Act, Title V, that applies to everybody. Black, white, male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. It applies to you. Some of these laws are non-positive law. They don't apply to everybody. Title 27 of the United States Code is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Now, if you distill alcohol, or grow tobacco, or build guns, you fall under alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and you have to pay special taxes. Anybody here distill alcohol, grow tobacco, build guns for a living? Okay. Well, if you don't do any of those things, then Title 27 does not apply to you. And it is non-positive law. It only applies to the people who do those special things. Now, if it is positive law, it says so. You go to Title V, it says, this is positive law. Right there at the top. Well, you can go through the 50 titles, flip over to page 18, and I have given you a list of all the positive law titles. These are the laws that you apply to you and absolutely must be followed. Okay? And out of the 50 possible titles, only 22 have been enacted into positive law. Can you find Title 27? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms? No, because it's not positive law. Please find Title 26, Internal Revenue. 23, 28, 26 should fall right in between there someplace. Title 26 is not positive law. It does not apply to everyone. And your question is, who does it apply to? And it's a perfectly valid question. Okay, one that we are going to be asking the IRS here very, very soon. But basically, the people who are liable for income tax are non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, and United States citizens living and working in a foreign country. So if that doesn't describe who you are, then you are not liable to the Title 26 tax code, which is a shock and a surprise to many people, although not in this group. Now, one of the interesting things is that the current federal income tax regulations define gross income to mean all income from whatever source derived unless excluded by law. So there are some incomes which are not gross income. The regulations explain that the items of income compensation for services make up classes, and then regulations direct the reader to another section which provide classes. A class of gross income may be excluded income. And that leads to a section, it's very, very convoluted. I mean, they can't just say it in black and white because then you'd know. They've got to go jump from here to there and make it really complicated. But eventually, you find out that this leads to a section where the types of income that are not considered to be exempt, eliminated, or excluded are listed. And the list only includes income from certain types of international and foreign commerce. How many people here are doing international or foreign commerce? I didn't think so. So, what you can do, for those of you who are interested in this, you can go to page 52 of the handout. And I have a long list of websites that you can do research in or at, establishing basically what the tax code is, what it says, and I'd like to repeat the 3 rules listed over on the side. Principled American who decides to exercise his or her rights in the face of government should be careful to pay attention to 3 rules. Rule number 1, protect your property. Rule number 2, get educated. Then rule number 3 is take action. Do not do them in the reverse order. The government does not play fair. They do not play nice. If you are going to do this at all, be prepared for the ride of your life, because it's going to, take pretty much all of your energy. Now, most of the law here in the United States falls under the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. Now, uniform means the same, or, basically everything is alike. What they did in the early 1930s is to take equity law, where the judge has an arbitrary decision, and admiralty law, and combine them together into the UCC, uniform. So that equity and admiralty are now the same. That makes everything a lot more convenient, doesn't it? Convenient for whom? Convenient for you? No, the people who are taking advantage of it. This is Uniform Commercial Code. What does commerce mean?
Trade.
Trade, contract. And code is not law, necessarily. It's, it's convoluted, it's cryptic, and it's hard to understand. Now, under common law, the presumption is that you have rights, unless you voluntarily waive them. All of your rights are protected except the ones you give up. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, the opposite is true. Under the Uniform Commercial Code, it is assumed that you have no rights unless you explicitly reserve them. Say, oh, by the way, I've got all my constitutional rights. Oh, by the way, I have freedom of speech. Now, how do you do that? If you are in a Uniform Commercial Code contract, you need to go to Section 1, Clause 207, which is defined on page 19, UCC 1-207, performance or acceptance under reservation of rights. A party who with explicit reservation of rights performs or promises performance or assents to performance in a manner demanded or offered by the other party does not thereby prejudice the rights reserved. Such words as without prejudice or under protest or the like are sufficient. So you just have to say out loud or in writing that you are reserving your rights. Now, why do they have to do that? They have to do that because any body of law, in order to be valid, must have two items: remedy and recourse. Remedy means that you are able to get out of trouble once you get into trouble. So if you're going to put me in jail, if I broke something, I've got to have some way I can fix it. Everybody hear of debtor's prison? Debtor's prison, you owe me money. Well, I'm going to put you in jail until you pay me my money back. You're in jail. How are you going to go out and get any money? Well, that's your problem. Kind of a catch-22, isn't it? And so you just had all the prisons just filling up with all these people who couldn't pay their debt, which is now completely and totally illegal. Now, the other option, the other thing that law must have is recourse. You have to have some way to stay out of trouble in the first place. It's like, okay, you just tell me what I have to do so I don't get put in jail overnight in the first place. And that's recourse. And that's what UCC 1-207 is. They've got it all the rules are set up so they win the game. Mostly because we didn't tell you the rules. Is the UCC unconstitutional? No. Is it specified by the Constitution? No. It makes it extra constitutional. It is out there in addition to the Constitution. Do you have a right to sign contracts under the UCC? Yes, your right to contract is unlimited. You can sign any contract you want. You just have to know that you've done it. And they're not telling you. Now, what generally happens under the UCC is something called notice and grace. I have to inform you of what's going on, and I have to give you some time period for you to respond. So I send you a letter. Dear Joe, you owe me $1,000. Love, Mike. And I mail you this letter. You go, $1,000? I don't even know Mike. And you just wrinkle it up and you throw it in the garbage can. You figure this is just, like some hoax. Well, in my letter, it says, please pay me within 30 days. Please respond in 30 days. And if you just wrinkle it up and throw it in the garbage can, I show up 31 days later with the sheriff. And the sheriff will legally take the $1,000 from you. I gave you notice. I told you that you owed me $1,000. I gave you a grace period. I gave you 30 days to respond. Well, you didn't respond, so it must have been true. So your response is always respond. If I send you a bill for $1,000, sit down at the typewriter, the computer, mail it back going, what? I challenge that. What you can do is refuse without dishonor. You say, I don't owe you anything. Now whose job is it to prove that I gave you some sort of service? It's my job. That's what the IRS does. The IRS sends you a notice. They give you 10 days to respond. If you don't respond, you must be guilty. Don't be afraid of the IRS. Just write them a letter back within the first 10 days. Challenge their authority. Say, no, I don't owe you this money. Prove it. Oh, well, gosh, that's going to be a heck of a lot harder. Gosh, if you want us to prove it, then we're not going to be able to collect the taxes. Good.
Isn't that more often cause of, okay, we need to audit you to prove it? That's my fear.
What's your Fifth Amendment right? Go ahead, audit. I've got a Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my person's, house's, papers, and effects, and a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate myself. I've got my, checkbook and stuff. I don't have to give it to you. I don't even have to sign my 1040 form. If I sign it under penalty of perjury, must be true. Well, if I don't sign it, let me see, I don't have to give you, the government, anything that you can use to put me in jail. If I sign my 1040 form and give it to you, can you use that to put me in jail? Yes. Then I don't have to sign it. If you show me, Judge, how I can sign that without giving up my Fifth Amendment rights, then I'll sign it. But they can't do that. Bill Conklin has a website, and he did that, and the judge says, I cannot rule on your case. He didn't say you have a lousy argument. He just said, I can't rule on your case because if I do, it's going to completely flip, the whole economic system. Oh, so my rights are going to be violated because it's going to be embarrassing for you? That's what's going to be happening in a couple weeks when we, bring the IRS. We are doing an IRS audit. Bring in your paperwork. You show us where the law says we've got to pay this cash. Now, I think the IRS is on their way out. The IRS, by its own statistics, say that 1 out of 5 people does not pay taxes. We've stopped volunteering. It's about time. 98%. And it took us a while to figure it out.
Is that 1 in 5 that should, or 1 in 5 period, including kids and everybody?
I think I don't know the exact statistics. I think it is 1 out of 5 people that the IRS claims should be. Okay? Because if you go by my statistics, everybody who's paying taxes shouldn't be. So I think the IRS is out to lunch. You don't have to worry about the IRS anymore. What you do have to worry about is what they're going to replace it with. National sales tax? Oh, that's better. We got rid of the lion and we got the tiger. Well, that's stupid. Which Menendez brother do you want to live with? We've got to make sure that they get rid of the IRS and that they do not institute a national sales tax, because the national sales tax is only 10%. No, 11%. I'm sorry, 12%, 20, 15, it pretty soon, before you know it, it's going to be 50. As far as I'm concerned, the only flat tax that I'm in favor of is a flat tax which is 0. So how are we going to operate the United States without an income tax? I don't know. How did we do it before the IRS? July 4th, we got the Declaration of Independence. July 5th, we got the IRS? I don't think so. When did the IRS happen?
1943, they started taking out our checks.
Well, they started taking it out of our checks, but the IRS came into existence in 1913. So between 1776 and 1913, there was no income tax. There was no inflation. Go figure. George Washington paid the same amount of money for a loaf of bread that Abraham Lincoln did. No inflation. So then what's Alan Greenspan talking about? You have to have 5% inflation every year. I'll get into more of that a little bit later. I want to get So we've got the United States Code, which is congressional statute, but you actually have to read it, and not all of it applies to you. The other stuff is the Uniform Commercial Code, which is private law. is a copyright. Can you use somebody else's book without their permission? No. Can you use somebody else's law without their permission? No. How do you get permission? Become a lawyer. When you become a member of the bar, then you get permission to execute their code. Now, I've also got a site here on the internet where you can go and download the Uniform Commercial Code for $5. You can't afford not to download it. You need to have that so that you can go and reference this stuff. You start reading it, it's like they've got it in writing. And you go, I can't believe it's in print. But it is. It's law. It is a law, and you volunteer into it. How do you volunteer into the Uniform Commercial Code? Anybody spend these? Anybody recognize this? What is this?
It's a note.
It's a note. Every time you spend one of these, you are automatically de facto under Uniform Commercial Code. Now, what is common law? Common law is based on property or land. Now, when you are under property, your economy is quid pro quo. That is Latin, which means something for something. You gave me silver, which is something. I gave you a book. That's quid pro quo. If I give you, you have an apple, and I want to buy your apple, and I say, well, you know, I don't have any money on my, would you take an IOU? And you go, well, okay, yeah, you look like a good guy. And you give me the apple, and I give you the IOU. Have we completed the transaction? No. Have I given you anything? Well, nothing of any value. All I've given you is a promise to pay. So that transaction is still open. And that's what's happened when you use these notes. You are not under common law because it's not quid pro quo. You are automatically under the Uniform Commercial Code.
Don't I have complete transferability of that note?
No. No, not at all.
Okay.
And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail.
If you buy property and you say, I want your property, and they're willing to take Federal Reserve notes, isn't that?
Well, that's why you never own it.
No, but they're willing to take those.
Well, you're not giving them
They're
anything.
willing to take
You are not
right.
giving them anything. You cannot go into a common law court because you did not give anything of substance. When you get your manufacturer's statement of origin, I would give them silver.
But when I bought my property, and
I know what you're telling me.
Reserve notes, they said, great, it's yours.
But you didn't buy your property. You don't own it in a loyal title.
You don't own it.
You don't own it.
$21 silver plus FYI.
We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the Federal Reserve. And that's a whole special topic. Any questions on Article 3 and the different classes of law?
I do have a question. On page 17, your definition of positive law.
Yes.
Now, when I was researching that recently, I understood positive laws to be all those laws that have been reviewed in the code, that they're as close and complete as the statute was, so they're considered positive law.
Okay.
However, not all of the code has been researched and can be said that they're complete with the statute.
Okay.
Okay? So those are not positive law.
Okay.
It didn't have anything to do with who they applied to.
Okay.
When I read this definition,
Well, I'd like to see your definition because I'm always willing to learn. I mean, there's stuff that I can be telling you that's wrong. I'm not deliberately giving you any bad information. I just don't know everything.
well, like you have this definition here about a positive law title is one which...
Well, I've gotten that.
Is that your definition? Or
I've gotten it out of Black's. The top part is Black's law. The bottom part is my interpretation and understanding of it.
So you're saying that you understand it that the statutes have been repealed?
No. A statute is law.
Right.
Code is a reflection of the statute.
That's why it's prima facie.
Right.
It's not exact.
It's not exactly. And so, whatever the code says, you got to trace that back to the actual statute.
Right.
Now, the United States Code is statute. Now, all of the titles are statute law. It's not code.
You have to have a enabling clause and an effective date.
Right.
In body law.
Okay? But there is a difference between, whatever the difference is, there are differences, and not all of the titles apply, are like positive law. So your definition, I mean, I don't know how I would interpret that. How does that apply to me?
Well, like in Title 26, they have, whoever, and I did read who they've empowered to go through and research this, has not gone through all of Title 26 and can say that each section accurately reflects the statute that was passed.
Now, what is the statute?
But see, when you look through the code, because it's not positive law, to really know what the law is, you have to go to the statute.
It has no enabling.
I'm asking you, what is the statute?
But sections of the code reflect statutes, different statutes.
Supposed to.
Okay,
Yes.
it's a reflection. So I've got Title 26, which is United States Code. Where do I go for the statute? What is that?
It's a compilation of several statutes, lots of statutes that have been passed over time. They categorize all of the tax code in Title 26.
Okay.
All the different statutes over all the different years just get categorized in Title 26.
Well, I'll research that. I'll research that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, Michael, I'm not sure, and I'm not trying to speak for Renee, but I read the same thing. And where I got the information, I was on one of the legal websites that ties into the government site where the U.S. Code is listed. And this was it contained in some general
I
information
think that's
on one.
probably where I read it.
Yeah,
I read a lot of those.
It was on one of the general information screens that you go to before you get into, the Title 26 and Title 27.
I'll go and research that a little bit more, because I've never heard that information before. Most people I know don't even know that the United States Code exists.
So that's why, like, when they refer to codes in some lawsuit,
Yeah.
if it's already positive law, then there's really no sense in going and looking at each individual statute.
Right.
I've already proven it's
Okay.
accurate.
I mean, that sounds plausible. I'll check into that.
Okay.
Thank you. So that was Article 3. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll come back and pick up with Article 4, because that's going to be a long one. The first 3 articles of the Constitution, legislative, executive, and judicial. Now we're going to go on to Article 4. Article 4 basically talks about how the states and federal government were going to interact, and it also sets up state citizens. So let's go to page 33 and read Article 4, Section 2. Says, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. Notice, please, that the word citizen is capitalized. Okay? And you are a citizen of each state. So let's fill in the blanks. A citizen of Texas shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities as citizens of Florida, citizens of California, citizens of Oklahoma. So what kind of citizens are we talking about? State citizens. When the Founding Fathers got together to form the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin would stand up and introduce himself as a citizen of Pennsylvania. Thomas Jefferson was a citizen of Virginia. You were a citizen of your state. A United States citizen was just kind of an abstract concept. You know, it's like one of those many. We're not going to list all 50 of them. So it's an abstract concept. So, but you have privileges and immunities. Is that good to have privileges? Well, it depends. What it was doing, if you are a citizen of Texas, are you a citizen of Oklahoma? No. Okay? So when you go from the United States to France, do you get all of the things that French citizens do? No, because you're out of your territory. So if you are a Texas citizen and you go to Oklahoma, you don't have all the same rights that Oklahoma citizens do, except for Section 2, which says that you will have all the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. So legally, you don't have rights, but we're going to extend you those same privileges, so that basically it's, all 50 states are the same. But you are a state citizen, and they are extending you these privileges when you go to the other states. Now let's go to the 14th Amendment on page 48. The 14th Amendment, Section 1, says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Well, that doesn't sound terribly onerous, does it? That sounds pretty simple. Okay? But let's look at citizens of the United States. That's a lowercase c. And they left out the word citizen the second time, but it's you're a citizen of the United States and a citizen of the state wherein you reside. So what is that? That's dual citizenship, isn't it? You're a United States citizen and a state citizen. Well, which one comes first? United States citizen. So in that clause, which one takes precedence? United States citizen. Well, it still doesn't sound too bad, except when you go back and read the second line. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What are the people in England called living under the king? Subject. Do they have any say-so? No. The king says, you're going to do this or else. A subject has no rights. You want to be subject to anybody? I don't. Now, the fact that it's a lowercase c is not, a mistake. It also says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. What's a person?
Commercial entity.
Oh, well, good. So if we look at page 20 in your handout, a person, and this is from Black's Law Dictionary. In general usage, a human being, i.e. a natural person. So when we are talking in conversation, we mean, warm flesh and blood body. Though, by statute, the term may include labor organizations, partnerships, associations, corporations, legal representatives, trustees in bankruptcies, or receivers. See 29 U.S.C. 152. That's Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 152. And the scope and delineation of the term is necessary for determining those to whom 14th Amendment of the Constitution affords protection, since this amendment expressly applies to person. A corporation is a person within the meaning of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection and Due Process Clause. So Ford Motor Company is a person. Microsoft is a person. For legal terms, isn't that wonderful? You get all the same privileges as Microsoft. Now, what is a juristic person? If I decide that we're all going to go into business together, we have to sign we put an ad in the newspaper for several weeks in a row. It says, our little group is doing business as Acme Fireworks. So 7, 8 weeks later, whatever the time frame is, we have a company, Acme Fireworks. Do you know that Acme Fireworks is born? That's the terminology. This company is now born. Now, is Acme Fireworks human? Does it have freedom of religion? Freedom of speech? A right to keep and bear arms? No. It's an artificial entity. It has whatever privileges that you and I and the state of Texas give it. A jurist is another word for the judge. The jury are the 12 people sitting there in the box. Anything which is juristic has to do with court. A juristic person is this artificial entity. Now, if I take us out into the parking lot here and I'm demonstrating my greatest, latest bottle rocket, and it works really, really good, except it burns down somebody's barn, does the owner of the barn have a right to sue Acme Fireworks? Yes. How many people are suing Firestone Tires for their bad tires? So Acme Fireworks, for the purposes of court, can go to court just like you or I could. It is a juristic person, artificial entity. Now, with the 14th Amendment, the Congress has invented a juristic person. It is a non-existent corporation. So, we, the people, ordain and establish the Constitution. When we do that, we create Congress. So, who works for who? Congress works for us. They are subordinate to us. When Congress basically or presumably ratified the 14th Amendment, they created a U.S. citizen. Now, what status does a United States citizen have to Congress? All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. You are subordinate to Congress if you're a United States citizen. So this is a second class of citizen. It was generated just after the Civil War. Basically to give blacks privileges. So we thought that the 13th Amendment freed the blacks and brought them up to our level. Except the 14th Amendment basically lowered all the whites down to their level. You have privileges. You don't have rights. The moment that you are born and they lay you on your mother's chest, you are, we the people, sovereign citizen. Suddenly, somehow or other, we go magically down to becoming a United States citizen. How does that happen? Birth certificate, Social Security number, driver's license, voter's registration card. You ever look at your voter registration card? Are you a United States citizen? Yes or no? Oh yeah, I'm a United States citizen. Oh boy, you have no rights. We the people have a right to keep and bear arms. A United States citizen has to get a concealed carry permit. We the people have a right to travel. A United States citizen has to get a driver's license. We the people can get married to anybody we want. A United States citizen has to get a marriage license. Those are all prima facie evidence of your subordinate status to Congress. The trick is getting rid of all of that.
Since that says born or naturalized in the United States with capital letters, wouldn't that be places that have, like D.C. and the territories only?
That's right. So if the I have another document that I literally just printed off the web yesterday. Again, there's too much information, so I keep adding more. but I downloaded a document that talks about the United States, and the United States of America, 3 different entities, and the citizenships of each of those. And I would have added in the book. Best I can do is to give you the website before we leave. All
So
right?
then the 14th doesn't apply to sovereign Texans.
If you are a sovereign Texan, you are not a United States citizen. You never ever want to say, yes, I'm a United States citizen, because you are admitting that you are subordinate to Congress. I am not a United States citizen. I am a Texan.
But what if you want to vote? So how do you?
You become an elector.
Did they just
Okay.
change it in the Constitution?
What's that?
Did they just change in the Constitution 2 years ago to wipe that word out?
Oh, do they?
Yeah, 2 years
See,
ago.
I didn't know that they had. So they're trying to close doors on us before we
They're
finally
trying to
get
say
there.
it's the same as a voter,
Right.
which is not.
It's not. So, United States citizen is different than a state citizen. A state citizen has rights protected by the Bill of Rights. A United States citizen basically has equal protection under the law. You want equal protection? That guy's got a ball and chain. You want to be equal? It just says that it's equal. It doesn't say that it was good. So we're going to give you a ball and chain too. That way everybody's equal. Now, on my passport, I've reproduced what it says. It says, the Secretary of State of the United States of America hereby requests all to whom it may concern to permit the citizen/national of the United States. What does it mean when you have 2 words divided by a slash?
One or the other.
One or the other. You can be boy/girl. You can be Democrat/Republican. One or the other. You can be citizen/national. So this passport will work for a United States citizen, but it will also work for a United States national. They don't tell you what that is, but on my passport it shows that they are different. Now, what is a national? A person owning permanent allegiance to the state. The term national, as used in the phrase national of the United States, is broader than the term citizen. So a rectangle can be a square, but a square is not necessarily a rectangle. A rectangle is a broader term. So if you are a national, it is a broader term than the word citizen. So it is possible for you to be a national and not be a United States citizen. Shh, don't tell anybody. We wouldn't want you to be able to exercise your rights. Now, in the reference that I gave you before, the USA, the House, the Republic is the USA. The Republic is the house that no one lives in, is the document. And this is a short subset, and it says the 14th Amendment is a setback to proper government. It runs counter to the ideals expressed in the preamble to the Constitution itself. The 14th Amendment is also probably never properly ratified. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are post-war amendments that basically gave Congress a lot of power. Presumably the North over the South, but we've managed to exacerbate that into being even worse. Article 5 of the Constitution. The Founding Fathers realized they were not omniscient. They knew that we would have to change it. So Article 5 is all about amending the Constitution. How do you go about changing it? Well, the first thing that you have to do is propose an amendment. How can you propose an amendment? Either 2/3 of both houses or 2/3 of the state conventions. Do we have to have Congress? No. We can get each state to hold a convention, and if you get 2/3 of those conventions to say, yes, we want this in a proposal, then it is proposed. You can bypass Congress. We, the people, still have some power. We just have to get our act together and get organized. Now, once an amendment has been proposed, how does it become ratified?
The states.
3/4 of all the states.
Legislature.
So you need 3/4 of the state legislatures. It's true. So you need a super majority.
You can bypass that too if you have Knox on your side.
Oh yes. And we will talk about that. You can also have 3/4 of the state conventions. We can bypass the state legislature, have a convention, and if 3/4 of the peoples in the states want it, then the amendment is also ratified. But it's 2/3 or 66% to propose it and 75% to ratify it. They deliberately made it hard. They didn't want it to be real easy. Number 5, Article 5 is on page 35. It says, all debts and engagements shall be valid. Why did they have to put that in? Why is that on Article 5?
Could we back up just a minute?
Sure.
Okay, in this Article 5, down here at the bottom, it says, no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. And yet, they passed an amendment in which some states, it would have had to have been unanimous for it to be legal. And some states did not pass it, so they lost their suffrage without their consent.
Then it's unconstitutional.
Right.
Which act are you referring to?
I'm talking about, it's over here where the senators are elected by the
Oh, the
populace.
17th Amendment.
Yes,
We're going to talk about the 17th Amendment very shortly.
Okay.
Okay. Article 6 says that all debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of the Constitution shall be valid. So we were changing governments. We were under the Articles of Confederation, and we owed a bunch of money to France and Spain for, helping us out. So when we go to the new Constitution, we say, well, we're going to be good guys, and we're going to, continue our debt. We're not just going to repudiate the debt. But basically, it says all laws pursuant to the Constitution and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority shall be the supreme law of the land. So the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any law notwithstanding is invalid, is unconstitutional. So Texas can make any law that it wants except a law that would legalize slavery, or otherwise violate your rights. And then it's also said that all persons, senators and members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by an oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So, again, we're supporting this trust idea. You got to take an oath. You got to promise to protect people's rights. But no oath or affirmation, but no religious test shall ever be required. So, we can't eliminate certain religions or even atheists. You can't have a religious test. Article 7 is basically just signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. It just says the 17th day of September, 1787, blah, 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 and this is, done and good. So the 7th Amendment is mostly signatures. And the 6th Amendment the 6th article is relatively short. So the three that are, typically important are 1, 2, and 3, legislative, executive, judicial. 4 establishes the relationship between the states and the federal. 5 is how do you amend it. 6 is we're going to keep our debts. And 7 is we're out of here. Put your signature down.
Now, should we properly refer to the government as federal or national?
Well, I'm just telling you what the Constitution says. I didn't say that I like all of it.
Mike, and some of those debts and contracts were with England also.
Yeah, that may be true.
France and Spain, but also
Yeah.
England, they had to pay.
Whatever the debts were prior, during the Articles of Confederation, those were all valid. So we were not going to be real scumbags and eliminate the debt just by refusing to pay. Okay. So, now, before it would be ratified, several of the states demanded that we have a Bill of Rights. It gives a whole lot of power to the federal government, and we're worried about that. And so we want it, and they said, oh, you got your rights. Alexander Hamilton said, don't worry about it. You don't need to put it on paper. Yeah, right. We want it in writing. So, most people know that the Constitution has a preamble. Most people do not know that the Bill of Rights also has a preamble. I was reading that in some book. It said the preamble to the Bill of Rights. They went, typo. They meant Bill of Rights, preamble to the Constitution. And they started giving me something I had never read before, and I jumped up because I've got the Constitution and the Bill of Rights hanging in my hallway. And I went over and looked at it, and I went, go to hell. Look at that. So, the preamble to the Bill of Rights. The conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution, expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. So what? So we wrote the Bill of Rights to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Whose powers? Congress, the government. Okay? So we don't want them to get out of hand. So what are we going to do? We are going to add further declaratory and restrictive clauses. Does a declaratory clause ask for permission? No. I'm telling you that I've got freedom of speech. I'm telling you that I've got a right to keep and bear arms. I'm not asking. These are further restrictive clauses. We're putting restrictions on the power of government. What are the original restrictive clauses? The Constitution. So the Constitution are restrictions on Congress's power, and we're going to add further restrictions. The Bill of Rights cannot be repealed. You can't go in and say, well, we're just going to scratch out the Second Amendment. We don't need that anymore. Wait a minute. You didn't give it to us in the first place. You can't take it back. We gave it to you. We are telling you that we have freedom of religion. Not asking. So,
But how do we stop them? Because we can get an amendment to change the Bill of Rights, like we have other amendments.
no, that is not true. You can get amendments to change the other amendments. The 18th Amendment established prohibition. The 21st Amendment repealed it. But that has nothing to do with rights. If we can change, let's talk about Rosie O'Donnell, because we're going to talk about all of these amendments. Right? Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Rosie O'Donnell and her million moms want to go to Washington, and they say, all we got to do is just get enough moms to vote, and we're going to just repeal the Second Amendment. And we're going to take away, your right to keep and bear arms. Okay, let's take that and say, you're going to repeal my Second Amendment, so I'm going to go to Washington with my billion fathers, and we're going to repeal we're going to repeal the First Amendment. We're just going to take away your freedom of religion. You going to do that? You going to sit still for any of that? I say you can't go to church unless you're, Branch Davidian. Ever going to change over to Branch Davidian? No! We didn't give you freedom of religion. You were born with it. Nobody can take it away from you. It is unalienable. It's a part of who you are. It's like the dreams that you had last night. You can tell me your dreams, but you can't give them to me. It's integral to who you are. You've got a heart, you've got lungs. You give me any of that, you stop existing. I can kill you, but I can't take away your right to life. I can violate your right to life, but I can't take it away from you. They cannot take away your freedom of religion, your freedom of speech, or a right to keep and bear arms. They can... The Bill of Rights doesn't give it to you in the first place.
I understand that. But they can modify the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, if we don't stop them.
They can burn it. They can shred it. They can get rid of the Declaration of Independence. That doesn't make your rights go away. So let them make any changes they want. They can shred the Bill of Rights. They're ignoring it so much anyway.
That's the whole.
The Constitution is only a national monument, under nitrogen gas in Washington, D.C. It's a novelty. It is something to look at. Here, kids. What's it say, Dad? I don't know. It's the Bill of Rights. You think I know what the heck the Bill of Rights says? I went to a government-controlled school. I have no idea what my rights are. I don't have a concealed carry permit. Won't get one, don't want one, don't need one. Don't need permission from anybody. People say, well, the interpretation of the Supreme Court is the only one that counts when we're talking about the Second Amendment. Oh, really? Well, then you come and stand in front of my front door when the government comes to collect my guns. You're going to find out that my interpretation of the Second Amendment is the only one you need to be worried about. Make sure you got your insurance paid up and kiss your kids goodbye. I'm not giving up my guns any more than I'm willing to give up my freedom of speech. Shred it. I don't care. It's a piece of paper. I am willing to stand up and defend my rights, whether anybody else does or not. And again, I ask you, how bad does it have to be before you are willing to stand up and fight for your rights? You got to know what they are. It's not a privilege. Nobody gave it to you. Now they are printed, they are enumerated by the Bill of Rights. They are listed. Just why? So that we know what they are? Well, today, yeah. Most of us have got to read it to find out what they are. Why did we list them? Did we list them for us?
For the government.
No, we listed them for the government. It says these are the things that are our rights. Keep your hands off. So let's go through them rather quickly and briefly. Page 43. And if you are going to continue your study, I hope you will, one of the things that I would recommend that you start with is to memorize the Bill of Rights. Oh man, I got to memorize something again? I feel like I'm in school. Okay, how much is your liberty worth?
Put it on a cassette and listen to it every time you're in the car.
Okay. Crystal has shirts with, the Bill of Rights, and it's all printed upside down. So when you want to find out what one of them is, you just kind of bend over and look at your belly. Oh, there it is.
Marie has one on.
Morning, everybody.
There it is. We got one right there. Yeah. So, First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. They should have put a period. End of story. Congress shall make no law. I'm happy. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. To say anything about separation? No. There's nothing in the Constitution that says separation of church and state. That's the wild figment of somebody's imagination. I have no problem with people having the Ten Commandments in school. What bothers me even more is there's a school in Georgia that is prohibiting the display of the Declaration of Independence.
Really?
If you can't have the Declaration of Independence in school, what can you have? Yeah. Or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. These are personal rights. You have freedom of speech only in Scrabble and crossword puzzles? You only have freedom of speech in the things that I agree with? No. If that was the only thing, you wouldn't need freedom of speech, because we agree. You have freedom of speech even when somebody else, oh my gosh, I'm going to toss and turn all night. What you say just drives me crazy. I won't be able to sleep tonight. Too bad. It's a personal problem. That's what freedom of speech is. So, petition the government for a redress of grievances. We can sue the government and presumably win. The government works for us. One of the things that they're doing right now is they're taking a remonstrance to Washington. A remonstrance is a word you don't hear very much anymore, but it's a formal complaint against the government. And in this particular case, it's all about the IRS. Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Does it say anything about the National Guard? No. You say, well, wait a minute. What is that well-regulated militia? Well, today, well-regulated means lots and lots of laws. Back in 1776, well-regulated means well-prepared. You got a pound of powder and 16 balls for your rifle, and you know how to use it. Where do you think the Minutemen came from? You hear the bugle call, you grab your gun and you go. You're ready on a moment's notice. That is well-regulated. All this talk about, well, militia means National Guard. The Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. The National Guard didn't show up until the early 1900s. You telling me the Founding Fathers were premonition? Most people forget that the United States started when the British tried to take our guns at Concord and Lexington. We said, hell no. Texas started out when the Mexicans wanted their cannon back. What did we say? Come and get it. Third Amendment. You probably never hear of the Third Amendment being put to use. It says, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Well, unless they change the way our soldiers fight, you don't have to worry about that. But back then, the Army traveled on its stomach. They'd stop in town, stop marching, they'd say, okay, dismissed. And the soldiers would go knock on the door and say, okay, I'm sleeping in your bed, you're sleeping on the floor. Oh, really? Yeah, I got the gun. So, what's that?
Wasn't it also for the English?
Yeah, well, armies, any army. You know, if you were a civilian, you were basically just, you know, stores. That's right. So you'd be, you know, overrun by your army and the opposing army. So that probably won't happen anymore. The Fourth Amendment, very important. It protects your privacy. It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. They have to have a piece of paper. You want to search? A, you have to have probable cause. What makes you think I've got anything? 2, you have to have a warrant. 3, the warrant has to be signed under oath or affirmation. Why? Because if you break down my door and you don't find what you're looking for, somebody lied. somebody is guilty of perjury. And we go back to the First Amendment, and I'm petitioning the government for a redress of grievances. So we force the government to get an oath. We don't want the government just coming in and go, well, I think we're going to look around just in case. Can't do that. And if you let them, if they stop you on the side of the highway and say, can I look in your car? And you go, yes, officer. You just gave them permission. No. You want to show me a warrant? Well, we're going to have to keep you here for 3 hours until we get one. Fine. I got nothing to do. Go get a warrant. And when you don't find what you're looking for, be prepared for a lawsuit. You do that 2 or 3 times, and they're not going to check your car anymore.
Is that true even if you have a license? Did you agree to
Yes.
come in any time with the...
Now they're going to argue that if you have a driver's license, that you have given them permission in advance. Okay, by contract. Okay, well, don't show them the license. Or get rid of it.
Isn't that a state's car?
Well, if they've got it registered right. Okay? So, basically, you've got to be careful. If you are a United States citizen, you have no rights. You are property. And you've got to do whatever they say. You are subject to the jurisdiction of Congress. So, stop being a United States citizen. Now, that's a completely different class, but we'll get around to it. Fifth Amendment. When everybody says, I plead the Fifth, okay, they're talking about one line in this amendment. You look at that entire paragraph. Is that, I plead the Fifth? No. There's a lot of stuff here. You have a lot of rights. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment by a grand jury. Only people on the grand jury can indict you. The government can't come along and throw you in jail for anything you want. You have to have other Texans who say, yeah, that sounds pretty bad. Except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So do soldiers and sailors have a right to all this other stuff? No. If you're a soldier or a sailor, you don't have a right to a trial. You go to a court-martial, which is completely different. You have no rights. If you're in the militia, when in actual service, you're acting as a soldier. So you get court-martialed too. Now, nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. They can't hold you on the same thing. They accuse you of murder, they accuse you of killing John, and, John shows up alive. Well, you didn't do it. They can't accuse you of it again. That was what the whole movie Double Jeopardy was all about. Really good theory. Now, nor be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. That's the Fifth that everybody remembers. But it also says, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. They can't take all your stuff away from you and say, okay, we're going to take you to court. How are you going to defend yourself? They have to have due process of law. What? Admiralty jurisdiction?
They do this with administrative law all the time.
That's right. It's all administrative law. It's statutes. It's under the UCC. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. A lot of people go into court and they say, Your Honor, I've got my constitutional rights. And the judge says, don't let me hear you talk about the Constitution again. What's the matter? I thought this was the United States. No, not the United States that you're thinking of. Sorry. You lose. Because you didn't know the game. You're standing on a baseball diamond going, touchdown. They go, we don't know what you're talking about. They pulled a fast switch on you. You've got to learn the law. You've got to know your rights. You've got to know where you stand. And your citizenship is a lot to do with where you stand. Finally, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Great. Who gets to decide what's just?
They do.
Jury.
Maybe a jury. That might help. But they can't just come in because the freeway's coming through and take your farm.
We're gonna find out.
I'd like to keep
This happened during the Revolutionary War. They came and took votes from private citizens to
Yeah.
be used to move the revenue process. So the citizens were saying, we don't want this to happen again.
Right.
That's what compensated for that.
Right. Okay? It's all based on property. Private property. What's that?
Who does decide what's
Well, the Constitution doesn't specify, does it? So it's kind of like a little loophole. Wait till we get to the 8th Amendment. The 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. Why is a public trial important?
Star chambers.
Yeah, we don't want to drag you off into a dark thing. Oh, he ended up dead. He was guilty. Really? What happened? What did he do? Oh, it was his secret. You don't want to see that. Okay? They used to do that. They still do that if you ever have a run-in with the IRS. We've got 3 kids in jail in Austin who are in jail because one guy confessed with a gun to his head. Oh boy. No star chambers? Not in the United States. Could never happen here. Wake up! In all criminal prosecutions, it's going to be a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So you can't do something here and have them drag you off somewhere else. In the Declaration of Independence, it says that the king has transported them beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. You know, the tax collector would say something here, they would take you to England and you'd stand trial. Do you have any friends in England? You have your lawyer over there? You're all by yourself. It's really hard to defend yourself halfway across, around the world. So the idea is, wherever the crime is, that's where it stays. So the government can't drag you off someplace else. That way, and the truth of the matter is that you were from there. You never really traveled far from your house. If you were a farmer, this is where you would have been. That's where the crime presumably would have committed. So this is supposedly allowing you to stay in your own county.
What about McVeigh?
Darn good question.
Yeah,
Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma, Denver.
right. Same thing. But if we don't know what the Constitution says, we can't complain.
What was another thing that they proposed with the children? Those cops dragged that black gentleman in his car for
Yeah.
Jasper? Taking him someplace else, didn't they, in trial?
No.
Come on, Jasper.
Now, I think one of the things that happens is they accuse you of a federal crime. Well, if it's a federal crime, it's basically the United States. Anywhere in the United States is appropriate as far as they are concerned. But it's certainly not in the spirit of the Sixth Amendment, is it? And to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. This is very important. What is the nature and cause of the accusation? If you get pulled over and the police officer says, I'm stopping you for speeding, that's the cause. If you go to court, and I'm learning this very quickly, they have cause numbers. Okay? And so that's the cause, speeding. What's the nature? Whether it is criminal or civil. You have to know which court you're in. You got rules of criminal procedure and rules of civil procedure. You got to know which rules they are. They've got to tell you. And to be confronted with the witnesses against you. That way I can't whisper to Mike over here and say, oh, gosh, these guys are doing it, and have them arrest you. Or really, who said so? Oh, a friend of ours. It's a secret. You can't do that. You have to be able to look the person in the eye and have that person say, yeah, you're the one that did it. So that you know who you're fighting against. You also have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in your favor. If there were innocent bystanders on the street corner and they saw you being attacked first and you were just doing self-defense, you can force them, you can give them a subpoena, and they have to show up. Now, they'd rather be out fishing, but what if you were the one? What if you're the one being accused and there were other people, and I was standing there on the street corner and go, hey, that's your problem, not mine. Wouldn't you want to be able to, force me into court to tell what I saw? So you have compulsory process for getting witnesses. If somebody saw it, they've got to be there in court. And it also says, and to have assistance of counsel for his defense. Anybody see the word lawyer in there anywhere? If a judge tells you, you must have a lawyer, and I was fully expecting this. When you go into court, they say you cannot represent yourself. You must have a lawyer. You ask the judge, excuse me, Your Honor, did you take an oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution? Are you violating my Sixth Amendment right? Certainly you wouldn't want to be guilty of perjury and treason. You have to be able to stand up for your rights. Nobody's going to give them to you. Nobody can give them to you. You need to draw that line in the sand. It's scary. It's not easy. But you've got to have the guts to do it, or you don't have your freedom. End of story. Your choice. Seventh Amendment. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. How many people here have ever been to a common law proceeding? Anybody here have any idea where you would go for a common law proceeding? How are you supposed to have due process of law if there are no common law courts? Does this, disturb anybody? I mean, we may not know what the answer is, but there sure as heck is something wrong. And it says, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20. That's the price of the class. If, for some reason or other, you decide you want to file a lawsuit against me because you're not happy with the course, you got ripped off, all right? You paid $20 and considerable, valuable consideration. Your time is worth something. So that puts it more than $20. You want to take me to court? It's going to be common law. And you have to prove that I violated your rights. Show me the property that I damaged. And frankly, I think I know the Constitution pretty well, so you're going to be in for a fight. Eighth Amendment says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Define excessive. I had a $400 fine. I put down an $800 bond plus another $2,500 bond. That's $3,300 for a $400 fine. Is that a little excessive?
Yes.
10 times the amount of the fine? Can I go with the Eighth Amendment? Well, I don't know. It doesn't really say. Who's going to judge? So it's a nice sentiment, but I don't know that the Eighth Amendment has ever actually been used.
You go to common law court and you sue the judge.
The Ninth Amendment. Let's talk about the Ninth and 10th Amendments together, because they are legal bookends. The Founding Fathers understood that as good as the Constitution is, there are probably some loopholes in it. The Ninth and 10th Amendments attempt to close those loopholes. The Ninth Amendment says, the enumeration, we just list your rights, we're not granting them. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights retained by the people. Does the Bill of Rights say anything about a right to have children?
A right to privacy.
No. doesn't say anything, but you have a right to have children? Yes.
A right to privacy.
You have, Fourth Amendment talks, it doesn't say privacy, but you have a right to be secure in your person's, house's, papers, and effects. So that's
Yes, but
privacy.
since privacy is a right, it is protected under this Ninth Amendment.
Well, it's protected by the Fourth Amendment, too.
Well, okay,
Okay.
not both ways.
But travel, is travel mentioned anywhere? No. Do you have a right to travel? Yes. So the Ninth Amendment basically says out loud, even though we didn't list everything, it doesn't list the fact that you've got a right to have a nose. We didn't bother to put that in there. But we listed some of them. There are other rights that we did not list. So just because it's not written doesn't mean that the people can't do it. The 10th Amendment basically is just the opposite. It says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That says if it's not written down, the government can't do it. They can't assume powers. Oh, that's what they meant. You know, it's not written there in the Constitution anywhere, but I'm sure that the Founding Fathers intended that. No! You want to give the government more power? You've got to amend the Constitution. Anything that is not explicitly listed that the government is doing is, by definition, unconstitutional. And we, the people, it's about time we read it, understood it, and started writing to our congressmen going, look, you can't do that. How many people are familiar with the space program? How many people have heard of John Glenn? Right? Everybody kind of liked John Glenn? Somebody was trying to pass a law that says any law that Congress has passed, they have to reference the article and clause from the Constitution that gave them that authority. And John Glenn said, we can't do that. You know, we wouldn't be able to pass half the laws that we do. Oh, really? What does that mean? That means that, you know, the Constitution is going to put chains on Congress. Gosh, we don't want to do that. We wouldn't be able to do half of the things that we're doing to the public. So we've got the chains, we just don't have a lock. You take your bicycle and wrap a chain around it, and you don't lock the two ends together. Is your bike still going to be there when you come back? Maybe not. Any questions on the Bill of Rights? Memorize them. They are very important. One short anecdote about how important it is. I mentioned it a little bit at lunch. I got pulled over by the police. They said that they were going to call a tow truck and they were going to impound my car. I said, oh, really? I said, then you're telling me that you're going to violate my Fifth Amendment rights. Oh, no, sir, we're not going to violate your Fifth Amendment rights. I said, well, it sounds like it to me. Fifth Amendment says you can't deprive me of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If you take my car, you're depriving me of property. You're not allowing me to travel to the airport, so you're depriving me of liberty. And unless you happen to be the judge, jury, and executioner, our little roadside chat here doesn't constitute due process of law. Now does it? I asked him if he had taken an oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. He started to stutter. The next thing you know, he runs off to talk to his buddies, comes back, hands me my passport, and everybody jumps into the cars, they slam the doors, and the police cars all drove away. Bye! If you don't know your rights, you don't have any. If you're not willing to stand up for your rights, it doesn't matter whether you know them. You have to stand up for yourself. No one is going to do it for you. Let's take a break.
Okay.
Fired up.
All right. We are doing pretty well. We are only an hour behind schedule, so I think that's doing pretty well, considering the amount of information that we covered and have to cover. I'm going to try to keep up my pace so that we can formally finish at 6 o'clock, because there are probably people that have got to leave. But once we get to 6 o'clock, we'll take a break, and then we will just continue and go into... If you have questions that you want to talk about something more in depth, let me know, and I will certainly do that. Page 22. I figured by this time the seriousness factor is a little bit high, and so I've attempted to interject a little bit of humor for comic relief. I have inserted something called a Bill of No Rights, which I've downloaded off the internet, and you've got a website there. I am not responsible for it. I only wish that I were. But the preamble to this Bill of No Rights says, "We, the sensible of the United States, in an attempt to help everyone get along, restore some semblance of justice, avoid any more riots, keep our nation safe, promote positive behavior, and secure the blessings of debt-free liberty to ourselves and our great-great-great-great-grandchildren, hereby try one more time to ordain and establish some common sense guidelines for the terminally whiny, guilt-ridden, delusional, and other liberal, commie, pinko bedwetters." And so it goes on to say what you do not have a right to. You do not have a right to be free from harm. If you stick a screwdriver in your eye, learn to be more careful. Okay? Do not expect the tool manufacturer to make you and all of your relatives independently wealthy, etc. So you can read that. I think that's very humorous. And sadly enough, you probably ought to post that for some people. You know? Now, the first 10 amendments are special. They identify unalienable rights. And, you know, although Congress may go through the motion of amending them or eliminating them, they may as well just go ahead and shred the whole Bill of Rights. They can do that too, but it doesn't make it valid. Now, there are several additional amendments. The 11th Amendment basically, the U.S. judicial power is denied in cases against the state, so that states have a little bit more difficulty suing each other. We looked at Article 2 that said the vice president is the guy with the second number of votes, second greatest number of votes. That was changed in 1804 by the 12th Amendment. Now, if you want to find out more about the Electoral College, go to the 12th Amendment. It's a relatively long one. It has a lot of details about who can vote for what and all that other stuff. So that is the process being used today. Now, the 13th Amendment is a little bit more confusing. Depends on which 13th Amendment we are talking about. Now, you and I know about the 13th Amendment that says no slavery. Okay? That was established right after the war between the states. Now, it turns out that there was another 13th Amendment. Now, after George Washington was president, John Adams became president. While John Adams was president, the U.S. Congress secretly voted to give England about 60 or 600,000 pounds of gold. Now, I don't know if that was physical pounds or British sterling pounds, but it was a lot of gold. I thought, we won the Revolutionary War. Why are we paying England all this gold? Why are Congress giving all this money in secret? Well, Benjamin Franklin's grandson happened to be a reporter. He found out about it, and he printed the story. What do you think the people at large thought about that? Were they happy? No, I think they had Pennsylvania Avenue filled with torches and pitchforks. They were a little bit upset. and they wanted to, dangle a couple of these congressmen from a long rope. Well, John Adams said, well, we can't have that, and John Adams helped to pass the Alien and Sedition Act. Anybody ever heard of the Alien and Sedition Act? The Alien and Sedition Act made it illegal to print nasty stuff about Congress, even if it's true. Don't you know? This is the second president of the United States. We haven't even gotten started yet, and they're already putting up the Alien and Sedition Act. Well, Thomas Jefferson was our third president. Thomas Jefferson's first formal action was to eliminate the Alien and Sedition Act. You can't have freedom of speech and the Alien and Sedition Act. It's one or the other. And so he got rid of the Alien and Sedition Act. Now, they were starting to realize that Congress was being infiltrated by a bunch of lawyers. What does BAR stand for? When you take the BAR exam, what does BAR stand for?
British Accreditation Registry.
British Accreditation Registry. British Accreditation Registry? So these are the King's men? And when you become a lawyer, you get to put Esquire after your name. It's a title of nobility. Well, the Founding Fathers that were still around went, wait a minute, we got to put a stop to this. And they did the Titles of Nobility Amendment. And I won't read it in its entirety, but it is on page 23. And it basically says that anybody who has a title of nobility is not a citizen of the United States, which is basically state citizen, and that means that you can't be in Congress, because that's a mere prerequisite. So the title of nobility amendment would basically make it illegal for lawyers to be in Congress. Think about it. How many of our congressmen are lawyers?
How many are not?
Almost, yeah, how many are not? We can count those on one or two hands. So, the title of nobility amendment was being ratified. And at the time, they would need 13 states to ratify it. 10 of the states ratified. They wrote in and said, yes, we vote for that. Then the War of 1812 broke out. Who were we fighting in the War of 1812? England. You know, the Revolutionary War wasn't good enough, they got to come back. Well, what happened during the War of 1812? They burned down the White House, where all of the records are kept. Son of a gun. There's a lot of strong evidence that leads to imply that the War of 1812 was specifically to prevent this 13th Amendment from being ratified. So now the War of 1812 is over. Congress gets back. Okay, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted? Oh yeah, we had this amendment, and 3 states didn't show up. We didn't get their answer. Let's go get it now. So they write a letter to the president, say go out and find out what those 3 states said. There is documented proof that the president of the United States wrote and said, what was your answer? Now there is no evidence that the states wrote back. However, because the states were now subordinate to the supreme law of land, every time the state would print the state laws, it seemed like a good idea to print the Constitution at the front page. That was the supreme law, all the state laws follow it. Now you have 2 guys out in Maine, and they just do this research. They're looking through all these old books. If you like that kind of stuff, fine. Now, when they take a coffee break, imagine them going, I wonder what the oldest book in the library is. And so they go through, running through all the shelves, and they find this old book, and they slide it off the shelf, and it's got all the dust, and they blow it off, and here's the Constitution. You got the Bill of Rights, and 11th, 12th, and 13th Amendment. That doesn't look like no slavery. It looks like no titles of nobility. We've never heard of that before. So they started doing research, and they found out that the title of nobility amendment was printed no less than 47 times between 1820 and 1860. Why would they print the title of nobility amendment if it hadn't been ratified? Now, all of a sudden, we get to 1860. What happened in 1860? Civil War. Son of a gun. And all of a sudden, title of nobility amendment is no longer printed. They just what? Erased it? How do you get rid of an amendment? With another amendment. Do you know of an amendment that gets rid of the titles of nobility amendment? No. So if it was properly ratified, it's still in effect. And if it wasn't properly ratified, we can finish it. Imagine what would happen if we ratified the title of nobility amendment. Now, we could all go to Washington, D.C., wave bye-bye to all the lawyers. Wouldn't that be great? So, now, I'm not saying whether the titles of nobility amendment was properly ratified. I wasn't there. But I've given you two websites. Well, first of all, a little paragraph that says, yes, the titles of nobility amendment was properly ratified, and another paragraph that suggests, well, maybe it wasn't, trying to be open-minded here. And then in back, I've got several websites that will determine what page is that on. On page 51, I point you to 3 different websites that you can go to and research it on your own. Let me tell you in advance that one of the websites shows you photographs of this amendment printed in the books. I don't know, looks pretty convincing to me. Now, so eventually, Civil War, we just forget about titles of nobility. Now we've got the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment says no slavery. So, great, whites and blacks are the same, right? No, we've now got to pass the 14th Amendment that creates U.S. citizens and gives blacks privileges. Privileges and rights are not the same thing. 14th Amendment was also not properly ratified. Oh, by the way. 15th Amendment, we finally give blacks suffrage. What is suffrage? The ability to vote. All right? When did women get suffrage? 1920. So girls, now you know how you rate relative to slaves.
Well, if we own property, we're able to vote, though.
Okay? So basically, you know, it's all landowners, and there were some women who were landowners, but not many.
40 years.
Right.
How to keep it in place.
You know, I guess that means that slaves are worth more because you actually have to buy a slave. You know, you just got to get married and have her do all your laundry and cooking.
Have you ever seen what the price of dating is?
Oh. Okay, so women were allowed to vote with the 19th Amendment. The 16th Amendment. 16th Amendment is also pretty controversial. It says that the U.S. can tax on income from any source derived. So if income is derived from source, then income and source are two different things. Even if we don't know what they are, an income is not a source. An income is derived from source. So what is a source? Well, we don't really get into that. The 16th Amendment was also not properly ratified. And Bill Benson's got a book, you probably all have read it, The Law That Never Was. The 17th Amendment changed the way that we elect our senators. Prior to the 17th Amendment, the senators were elected by the state legislation, so that the state had some control over what happens in Washington. 17th Amendment allows us to elect our senators by popular vote. What does that move the United States towards? Democracy.
Not properly ratified.
Yeah. So, ever since the Civil War, things in Washington, D.C. have been happening fast and loose, and they just say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't look at that man behind the curtain. Just trust us. When we lie, we're Federalists. They're the anti-Federalists. We wouldn't lie. So, the 18th Amendment is when Prohibition started. What were we prohibiting? Alcohol. Okay? Now, the 18th Amendment is unique because it's the only one that's ever been repealed. It was repealed by the 21st Amendment. Okay? It was repealed in 1933. Everybody heard of the Budweiser Clydesdales? They were a celebration for the end of Prohibition. We were so glad that alcohol wasn't illegal anymore, that Anheuser-Busch built this great big wagon to celebrate. Well, it was such a popular hit that they just kept it as their symbol ever since. So if anybody, if you ever see the Budweiser Clydesdales, you can say, well, that's been around since 1933 with the repeal of Prohibition. Now, yeah, the way that I remember that is that when I was growing up, some states you had to be 18 in order to drink, and in other states you had to be 21. So the 18th Amendment started Prohibition, and the 21st Amendment repeals it. The 22nd Amendment, a president is limited to 2 terms in office. Why did that happen? Roosevelt. We were a little bit concerned that we might get an elected monarch. And so we basically said, 2 turns at bat and you're out of there. 23rd gives District of Columbia electors as though it were a state. Why do we want to do that?
I don't know.
How do we go back and undo that? Washington, D.C. is a federal territory. Why should we give that federal territory any more power than it already has? Do you see a habit or a pattern here? 24th, elimination of the poll tax. We were going to allow blacks to vote. We're just going to charge them so much money that they couldn't. 25 is a formal procedure for overthrowing the president. After I memorize the Bill of Rights, that's the next one that I memorize. I want to know how to overthrow the president. 26, 18-year-olds can vote even though they still can't think. What difference does it make? It doesn't count anyway. We're just going to let you pull a lever, drive that little plastic steering wheel. Now, when was the last time we amended the Constitution? 1992. How many people were alive in 1992? How many people were sat up all night on television watching all this stuff go back and forth, listening to all the debates? You didn't even know it happened. You mean that they are going to amend the Constitution of the United States, the supreme law of the land, and you didn't even know it? Neither did I. How did they slip this past us? How can we, the people, be responsible for Congress if we don't even know that they're modifying the Constitution? 1992. That's not even 10 years ago yet.
They know we're asleep.
They know that we're asleep. It's like, ding, 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 somebody better wake up. And it better be us. Any questions on the other amendments?
Why don't you use A and C for the titles of nobility?
Because there was another 13th Amendment.
There was a B?
There was a 13B that somebody said, okay, we're going to propose this, and then it just never happened. It was just before the Civil War, and it got shut down.
That was the one that Lincoln put through to justify slavery in certain states.
Right.
To keep the Union together.
Yeah, and it failed. So we've actually had 3 13th Amendments. Okay, now we're going to talk about the real heart of the problem. I mean, Congress is bad, and the United States is in deep trouble. But I'm not going to point my finger just at Congress. We have the best money that Congress can buy. Sigh. We're going to talk about legal tender and lawful money and what is the difference. The real problem is the economy. That's how the Constitution got started. They sent our guys to Philadelphia because the economy was bad. They were suffering from inflation. Some things, just never change. Now, let's talk about gold and silver. Why are gold and silver used as money? Around the world, not just in the United States.
They're valuable.
They are valuable. They have an intrinsic value. If you don't like coins, you can melt this down and make silverware.
You don't rest in rock.
That's where the term came from. Now, not everybody had silverware because silver is, kind of hard to come by. But, if you don't like it in this form, you can melt it and change it into something else. It has intrinsic value. All right? Why else do we use silver and gold?
Constitution, so states.
Well, it was
A
put into
small
the
amount
Constitution.
of it, especially the gold, can equal a fair amount.
Right. So gold is very, very valuable. Why is it so valuable?
No free electrons, it won't oxidize.
It won't oxidize, right? How much gold is there? There's a limited amount. Can gold inflate? Can we just go out and just, start spitting out more gold? No. If you want more gold, what do you have to do? You got to go and dig it up. And it's hard work. And so you can spend, 10 or 15 years of your life and end up with this little ball of gold. Okay, you worked hard for it. You deserve it. Is it that ounce of gold going to inflate the economy? No. So the fact that there is a limited amount of gold and silver is a primary reason that countries all over use this as a medium of exchange. Now, when they had these goldsmiths, what you would do is, you want to buy my apple. You give me this, this gold coin. Well, there is one disadvantage to gold and silver. You try carrying this around in your pocket. If I don't have a belt on, I'm gonna lose my shorts. It's heavy. And not only that, if I'm walking around and this stuff is jingling around, everybody knows I've got it. And they can either cut my throat or cut my purse, and take it from me. So it does have a disadvantage. So one of the things that we used to do is take your money to the goldsmith. One, he would punch it into coins for you and make them all the same. And then he also had a great big lockbox. So you can say, well, I'm going to just leave my gold here where it's safe, and the goldsmith would give you a receipt for it. Kind of like Chinese laundry. You bring back the receipt, we'll give you your gold. No ticky, no washi. So we get your receipt. So now I want to buy your gold, or you buy your apple. I can say, don't go away. And I can run down to the goldsmith, give him my receipt, get the gold, come back and say, okay, here's the gold, you give me the apple. Well, what are you going to do with it? You don't want to keep it around, so you run down and give it to the goldsmith, and he gives you the receipt. Well, gosh, that's a whole lot of running around. If I've already got my gold receipt, can I give you the gold receipt? You give me the apple? Yeah, you're going to end up with it in 5 minutes anyway. It's a lot easier to carry paper. You just put it in your pocket or your wallet. It doesn't weigh as much, and it works the same way. You want the gold, you can go and pick it up. Now, the guy who's holding all the gold goes, wow, this is a real bummer. I've got 1,000 gold coins, and people only come in and collect like 100 of them at any one time. So only about 10% of the people who have gold here ever ask for it back. Everybody's using these gold receipts. Now, because I'm not terribly scrupulous, well, how can I take advantage of that? I can print more gold receipts. Yeah, but if I spend them, everybody's going to say, hey, Jack, how come you got all this money? Where are you getting all that? So I really can't spend it myself, but I can sure loan it to you. Nobody's going to ask you. If they say, where'd you come up with that money? You go, I borrowed it from the goldsmith. So, that's like cool. So if I only have 10% of the people collecting their money, and I have 1,000 coins, I can print 10,000 notes. So I can print all these counterfeit gold receipts. and I can loan them to you and loan them to you and loan them to you, and now everybody's using the gold receipts. You can't tell them from the original ones because I printed the original ones. And now 10% of those people, 10% of the $10,000 are going to come in and collect their gold. And I've got the 1,000 pieces of gold that I need. That's how fractional reserve banking got started. I'm basically counterfeiting money legally. So now, and this is a really great setup. I can counterfeit this money, I can loan it to you, and now when you borrow money from me, you got to pay me back in interest. And I'm going to ask for the interest in gold. So I don't know where you're going to come up with it, but you're going to go out and bring back more gold. So if I've got more gold, I can print 10 times as much money. For every gold coin you print me, I can print 10 certificates and loan that out. It doesn't take an idiot to figure out that I'm going to be making money pretty much hand over fist here pretty soon. Now, I've got almost the perfect setup. Almost perfect because, you don't borrow enough money. I mean, you're a nice guy, but, you only borrowed maybe $5,000. And you're going to do that once because you want to buy a house. If I want to make more money, I got to figure out a way to loan more money. Who can I go to that will borrow money from me? Can I loan money to a government? Will governments borrow money? Yeah! And they borrow lots of money. Especially if somebody's about to attack. If your country is going to war, don't you want to borrow money so you can buy guns and defend yourself? I mean, and if you're going to borrow money now, aren't you willing to borrow that money at like a really high interest rate? The goldsmith says, yeah, I can loan you the money, but it's going to be 25 or 30%. The bad guys are coming. I need the guns today. I can't work. If you don't give me the money, I'm not going to have anything to defend. So yeah, I'll borrow the money. I'll give you your 30%. I got the perfect solution. Except, you're battling this guy over here. So I've loaned you money. I'll go over here. You want to borrow money? I mean, you're fighting against this lady over here. You don't want her to win. I can loan you money too. So now I'm playing both ends against the middle. I'm loaning you money at 30%. I'm loaning you money at 35% because I'm not giving you very many chances. And I've got the two of you fighting. You're both borrowing lots of money. I'm making money hand over fist. This is good. What's the only bad news that I could ever get? The two of you shook hands and decided not to be at war anymore. Oh my gosh, you can't have that. If you stop the war, you're going to stop borrowing money. This sounds like wild, crazy, that's exactly what's going on. When Napoleon was exiled, they put him off in Elba, hoping he'll never come back. What do you think the bankers did? Hey, Napoleon, you want to come back and kick some butt? Why do you think we had the Louisiana Purchase? Because Napoleon needed money. He said, yeah, I'll give you that entire Louisiana Purchase. You can have all of France's land. I need money because I got to come back and kick some butt. He was also borrowing money from the bankers. So we got here, we are the United States. We are printing our own money. Oh my gosh, we can't have any of that. We don't have any control. If you're making your own money, how can we loan you money? So all through the history of the United States, they've been trying to set up a central bank. Alexander Hamilton was the guy who was trying to get it started. And he did. They called it the First Bank of the United States. And then the contract ran out. And so they brought it back again, and they called it the First Bank of the United States. And then it went away, and they brought it back a third time. This time they called it the Second Bank of the United States. So we've had, a central bank several times. Well, Old Hickory, what's his name? Andrew Jackson said, you guys are a den of vipers, and by the strength of God, I'll rout you out. And he threw out all the central bankers, and he killed the central bank for about 75 years. He did a good job of it. Not a perfect job, but back in 1913, the central bank came back. What do we call it? Federal Reserve. So they print money out of thin air. You've heard the joke about the woman goes into the bank and says, I can't be overdrawn. I still have checks left. You know, that may be cute, but that's what the Federal Reserve is doing. Prior to 1913, how did Congress get money? They have to beg. They have to come to us and say, we were going to have this big scientific, we need $1 million to study the sex life of the mosquito. What did we say? I don't think so. It's like, oh, darn. You know, we can't do our pet little project. So then they invent the Federal Reserve Bank. Congress is authorized to coin money and regulate the value thereof. They are not authorized to give that power to somebody else. If I'm a police officer, can I give you my gun and say, would you direct traffic for me while I go to lunch? Can I give you that authority? No, because I can't give you the responsibility that goes with it. We give Congress the responsibility to coin money. We did not give them the authority to give it to somebody else. But they did. Federal Reserve Act is completely, totally, 100% unconstitutional. I don't care how much, it depends on what your definition of is, the president does. It's unconstitutional. So now, we've got the Federal Reserve Bank printing money out of thin air. What does Congress do? They borrow money from the Federal Reserve. Did they ask us? No. They just borrow the money. They do their, study on the sex life of the mosquito, and then they turn around to us and go, oh, gosh, we've got a national debt. You got to pay taxes. We got to pay our national debt. Wait a minute. They were supposed to ask us before. Now they've invented a system where they can get the money without asking. It is criminal. It is treason. Absolutely treason. Anybody here still think that the government is out to you for your best interest? I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Oh, yeah? Stand still. Now, one of my favorite quotes is from Ludwig von Mises. Ludwig von Mises says on page 24, the government is the only institution that can take a valuable commodity like paper and make it absolutely worthless by printing on it. Think about it. If you'd given me scrap paper, I could use it for something, but now that you turn it into money, it has no value. Now, money is defined by Black's Law Dictionary in usual and ordinary acceptation. It means coins and paper currency used as a circulating medium of exchange and does not embrace notes or IOUs, evidence of debt or other personal or real estate. A note is an instrument containing an express and absolute promise of signer to pay a specified person or order. It's a promise to pay. Now, when we started this class, you gave me silver, I gave you a book. That is quid pro quo, Latin for something for something. We do an exchange. So once I've given you something, you've given me something. Once we've done this trade, the transaction is over with. I'm happy, you're happy, leave me alone. Now, if you say, gosh, I'd really like to have that apple, and I say, well, okay, it's $1. You say, well, I don't have $1, I've got an IOU. If I give you the apple and you give me the IOU, have we finished the transaction? No. Now, somebody's got a banana, and I want to buy the banana. And they say, well, it's $1. They say, well, instead of $1, I've got this IOU from so-and-so. Would you take my IOU? You go, yeah, okay, I'll take that. and I give the IOU and I take the banana. Have we finished the transaction? No. Somebody still owes this guy $1. Somebody is still stuck. That's what a note is. At the top of the dollar, it says Federal Reserve Note. These are official IOUs that are absolutely, totally worthless. Now, they are not the same as this. This is a silver certificate. At the top, it says silver certificate. And at the bottom, it says $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. So you could used to be able to take one of these into the bank, and they would give you silver. And I'm not talking about the bus tokens that we use. I mean, if you listen to these things drop on the floor, they sound hollow. Doesn't sound anything like silver. So, basically, this is real money because it can be converted into gold or silver. This is a Federal Reserve note, and it happens to be worth whatever Alan Greenspan says it's worth. It is fiat paper. Now, what I want to do, has anybody not seen silver certificates? I'm willing to pass these around. I want them back.
Are they just a collector's item, or are they still considered? I mean,
No,
always be legal tender, right?
you can spend that. You know, you could spend it like it's $1, but it's worth a whole lot more. I mean, I've got those in plastic. I won't spend it, and I'll give you $, but I want that one back.
I mean, legally you can.
Yes, legally you can spend it. Now, you're not going to find those in circulation because there are a couple 100,000 of us that know the difference, and we'll snatch those out of circulation faster. You know.
$2 bill, it doesn't say either.
What's that?
$2 bill. It doesn't say silver certificate or.
Right. I have to check I have a $2 note. I haven't checked that.
There were some older $2 bills.
Right.
Time ago.
Okay. Now,
It might be the one Kennedy issued.
okay. Now, negotiable.
I'll give you $2,000 for that.
$2,000 for what? What is that?
One of your silver certificates.
Oh,
$2,000 bill.
yeah.
Well, you want like that? How about this million?
Yeah. Now, negotiable means that we can negotiate about it. If I've got a pile of silver and you've got something that you're going to say, well, how much is it? And we can negotiate. Okay? You can decide whether you want to take it or not. Non-negotiable means you don't have a choice. It cannot be transferred. Not capable of passing title or property by endorsement or delivery. This was the question that you had earlier. If I take your apple and I give you this silver, I'm basically transferring property. This is now your property. The note cannot transfer property. It's just an instrument of debt. It's basically a tally system. You do not own this $, even if it's in your wallet. Who owns this $? The Federal Reserve. It's got a serial number on it and everything. So this is their money. If you go to Avis and you want to borrow one of their cars, you take their car, drive it around for a week, fill it up with gas, bring it back. It's still their car. They're going to charge you money for borrowing it? Yes, that's known as an excise. Rent on the car. The 16th Amendment, the Supreme Court has determined that the 16th Amendment confers no new power of taxation on the Congress. Congress can't do anything now that it couldn't already do before the 16th Amendment. The Supreme Court says all the 16th Amendment does is to establish the income tax as an excise, which means that you are paying rent for using their property. It's like going to Avis. Did you transact business using these? Yes. Well, you got to pay rent and all the paper dollars that you handled. Why do people use the Federal Reserve notes?
Don't have much choice.
There's no other choice. It's like Henry Ford. You can have your car any color you want as long as it's black. If you have a choice of one, is it a choice? No. So, what do we need? We need some options. So instead of using this, we can use this. This is American Liberty Currency, minted by an organization called NORFED, N-O-R-F-E-D, the National Organization for the Repeal of the Federal Reserve. So not only, if you want to carry the silver in your pocket, you can carry silver certificates. This is a certificate. It's a warehouse receipt. So if you have this in your possession, you can go in, and for every one of these, they will trade you one of these. This is just a placeholder. Put it in your pocket, just like the goldsmith. Use this instead of that. But if you want this, you can go and pick it up, because they don't print one of these unless they have one of these in circulation or stored in a warehouse someplace. Now you have a choice. You don't have to use these. Now if somebody buys something and they give you this, technically you're obligated to take it. It's not negotiable. This is negotiable. These have been out for 3 years. There's already $1 million like this in circulation.
See, being in business, I never knew that. I wouldn't have known if somebody came in and gave me.
And that's why I'm here to educate you. Okay? It is an option. And every time we use these, we don't have to pay rent on the other guy's stuff. This comes in 1, 5, and 10s. And they're different sizes, so that when you stack them, all the 1s are shorter, the 5s, it's really cool stuff. Gosh, I love it.
Lighter than $1? It looks
I can pass this stuff around.
Depends on how much it's for, I guess.
Yeah, where can we get it?
Okay? One of the places that you can get it is from me. I am a redemption center for NORFED. You can go to norfed.org and you can buy it off the internet. And basically, in the back of your book, in the handouts, it is like the second or third item. Okay, I've got a little flyer for the NORFED, and it explains what it is, what it looks like. It is perfectly legal. We are not violating any laws. So for those of you that don't want to go to jail for not having a driver's license, or go to jail for not paying your taxes, this is something that you can do, which is non-threatening, it's not legal, and you are helping to restore the republic.
It's not legal.
It is legal. It is legal. It's not illegal. It's not illegal.
Do the merchants accept it?
You can negotiate. Now, if a merchant will accept it, then you can put a little silver tag. You know how you got American Express, MasterCard, Visa labels on the door? We've got another silver label about the same size that says ALC, American Liberty Currency. And we've got 3 or 4 places in Austin that will accept it.
Yeah, to give you a catalog, I'll tell you what merchants,
Right.
what redemption centers are.
So if you are a business, talk to me. I'll give you a silver certificate, a silver label. You put that on your door, and you're helping us. Now, what do you do when you get it? 2 things. Give it out to people as change. You go, gosh, what's this? Spend 5 minutes, tell them what it is. Okay, tell them it's silver. In fact, these spend real easy. Man, you go into Taco Bell with this, and they go, wow, what is that?
It's $20.
You know, it's It's like, do you take silver? It's like, wow. And frequently what they'll do is they'll put this in their pocket and put $10 of their money in the thing. I went into McDonald's one time, sold 1 to the guy behind the cash register and 4 to the people after me. They go, wow, what is that? I mean, I had to go out to the car to get more silver. Okay? People know value when they see it. And when you start using this instead of that phony money, not only are you helping to recover, our economy, but you're helping to restore the republic. And it's only been around for 3 years yet. As more and more people learn about it, it's going to help. And I'll talk to you some more about that same organization.
Did it bring a lot with you? Did you bring a lot of it with you?
Yes, it did.
In essence, if the Federal Reserve, if we use their note, do they, in essence, own our property that we buy with that?
No, that is not true.
Even though it was not a completed...
But it isn't a completed transaction.
We have the computer.
The thing is, they don't own it, but neither do you.
Your grandchildren own it.
Right. It's a real strange and bizarre thing.
Hey, this Norfed Redemption Center, is it a bank?
No, that's me.
Oh, that's you.
That's me.
Oh, so I said, see, I said, we can go right there and get it.
That's me. And we have 9 redemption centers in Austin already.
There's 4 or 5 in Houston.
3 years ago, they had 20 redemption centers. 2 years ago, they were up to about 100. Today, we have about 1,200. Norfed is growing exponentially. You tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and so on, and it won't be long, before everybody knows about Norfed.
Isn't it interesting, though, that they're taking the Federal Reserve much like with the hopes?
Well, that's cool. You give me worthless Federal Reserve notes, and I'll give you valuable silver. Yeah? Why would you do that? What are you going to do with the Federal Reserve notes? We're going to give it back and buy more silver.
That's right.
It's like great, It's like, it still works. The more silver we get into circulation like that, the better we're off.
It would be to everybody's benefit, everybody.
Yes.
Get the silver, and it's going to be a conversation piece when they give it out, and then...
Okay.
I have a question. Have these notes ever been counterfeited?
They cannot be counterfeited.
They cannot. Well, that's great.
They literally cannot be counterfeited. They have so much, they've got all sorts of fine print. I can barely see the line. And you look right at the top, it has a line on it. That is the Pledge of Allegiance, the Bill of Rights, the preamble to the Constitution. And I went, yeah, right. And I gave it to an Australian girl, and she started reading it. And I know she doesn't know the Pledge of Allegiance to the Bill of Rights. I know it. And it's like, wow, that really is there. And it also has a DNA coding. So when you have one of these, we can check it against that DNA coding to find out if it is really, what it...
Are you saying
really
coding COD or coding COAT?
COAT.
Okay.
Well, both.
Well,
Now, the Federal Reserve Bank started in 1913, the same year that the 16th Amendment was purportedly ratified, and the same year that the IRS came into existence. What a coincidence. I've always been so amazed that all of the famous people were born on holidays. What are the chances of that? So, now, let's talk a little bit about economy. All you need to know about economy is the law of supply and demand. If there's a lot of it, the price is going to be really cheap. How much are you going to spend for cow patties? Probably not a whole lot. If I want some, I'll just go out back to the back 40 and pick some up. Gold, how much is that worth? Well, a lot, because there isn't very much around. Now, the same thing is true about peaches. If I'm a peach farmer and I got 1 million peaches, and I sell my 1 million peaches this year, let's say I sell them at 25 cents a piece. Next year, I try to grow peaches and I've got rain and frost and all sorts of weather problems, and I only have 500,000 peaches. How much are peaches going to be at the market? About 50 cents. The price is going to go up. So you've got good years and bad years. You know, this is called market flow. And if people decide they don't want peaches anymore, then the price is going to go down. This is a normal, healthy economy. It's a free market economy. The people set the price based on what they're willing to pay. Now, we got the Federal Reserve that comes in and says, hey, this bad years, good years, bad years, good years, that's got to stop. We want to have just like a smooth, steady, flow. So we're going to set up the Federal Reserve so that we eliminate inflation and deflation. Oh, really? Okay. So what happened in 1929? The stock market crash. I thought the Federal Reserve was supposed to fix that. I thought it was supposed to prevent that. Ugh. Okay? So let's talk about money. When we talk about money, frequently we refer to it as the blood of the economy. Excellent, excellent metaphor. Because it circulates. If I buy something for $1 and he buys something, he buys something, he buys something, and then they buy it for me, that $1 bill has gone around through all of us and basically is just an exchange. Just a placeholder. What happens if you have too much blood and your blood pressure goes up? Is that good for you? No. What happens if you accidentally slice your wrist and you start to lose blood? Is that good for you? No. There's a certain range. Too much is not good, not enough is not good. There's a certain limit in the middle where you need to have, in order to have a healthy body. Same thing is true of money. Too much or too little, and your economy is going to be in trouble. I'm going to oversimplify this, just so that, nobody can miss it. Let us pretend for the next 10 minutes that the only thing to buy or sell in the United States are bales of hay. Everything else you just kind of grow yourself. The only thing we're going to buy or sell are bales of hay. There are exactly 1 million bales of hay. There are also exactly 1 million paper dollars. How much is a bale of hay? $1. The dollar is worthless. It's just a representation of the bale of hay. So I've got my 100 bales of hay, but I've only got 1 cow. There's no way that my cow can eat all that hay before it goes, rotten. And plus, I got a little tiny apartment. I don't have a place to store 100 bales of hay. Where would I sleep? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell my 100 bales of hay, and I'm going to end up with $100. Isn't that great? So now, $100, I can put that in my pocket. I can carry it. Or I can go home, open up the safe, put the money in the safe, take out my trusty rifle, lock the safe, turn on the security alarm, and sit on the couch all night. And I'm wide awake because I've been drinking coffee. I am just one wired so-and-so. And I'm going to protect my $100. Now, overnight, the Federal Reserve decides to print and distribute another 1 million paper dollars. So I wake up, the sun comes up, it's breakfast. Now there are 2 million paper dollars and still 1 million bales of hay. How much is a bale of hay? Bale of hay is worth $2. Bale of hay is worth $2. I go into the safe and I bring out my $100. How many bales of hay can I buy? 50. So, without triggering the alarm, without walking past me and my rifle, without even opening up my safe, the government has stolen 50% of my buying power. That is why inflation is evil. Because Because they're stealing from you and you don't even know it. How did we get into trouble in the first place? Why did we write the Constitution? Because each of the colonies was printing money. They were suffering from inflation. After World War I, Germany had a 5,000% inflation rate. Whatever cost you $1 in January cost you $50 in December. When I was a boy, my mother told me that you would walk around with a shopping bag full of money. Why? Because you're rich? No, because the money is worthless. It cost you $1 million to go and buy the groceries. And you say, oh yeah, but that was back, World War I. That's before my time. Ever go to Mexico? You go down and buy a hamburger and fries in Mexico, it's going to cost you 77,000 pesos. Oh my gosh, and you get your calculator out and you go, oh, that's $8. Why are pesos worthless? Because Mexico has been inflating their money. If you walk around and you see a peso on the ground, you don't even pick it up. It's not worth the time to bend over. Oh, but wait a minute, there's a washer on the ground. I'll pick that up because I may be able to use that. So it can't happen here. Ever since 1913, the Federal Reserve has been printing money, printing money, printing money. Where did it go? How come we're not knee-deep in dollar bills?
Federal Reserve, the IRS has been...
Because they're putting it in on one end and taking it out every April 15th. What does it cost them to put it in? Nothing. They print the money out of thin air. And they put it into circulation. How do you get it? You work your butt off. You work hard. You go, okay, I've got it. And the IRS comes along and say, okay, we're going to take 40%. Thank you very much. The IRS does not pay for roads, hospitals, and national defense. It's a lie. They're just a vacuum cleaner to suck out all the paper so you don't realize that your money isn't any more worthwhile than Mexico's. And they've been doing it since 1913. If I have a bucket and I pick a hose and I start pouring water into the bucket, what's going to happen about 1 or 2 minutes from now? It's going to overflow. Well, if I punch a hole in the side of the bucket and I'm standing here pumping water in and talking and just holding the hose and filling up the bucket, how long is it going to be before you go, wait a minute, how much are you going to fill up that bucket? How are you doing that? Doesn't it occur to anybody that that bucket should overflow sooner or later? How much money does the Federal Reserve have to pump in? How much money does the IRS have to take out before you go, wait a minute, something's wrong? We have to regain control of our economy. If we don't regain control of our economy, we are sunk. End of story. I'm going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about deflation.